Ladies and gentlemen and guitar players everywhere, welcome back to another episode of Different Strings, a guitar adjacent podcast. This is the segment we call Music That Matters, and I am your host, Wes, along with my good friend Andrew. Say hello, Andrew.
Hello. And Wes, you got the name of the podcast completely wrong.
I know, I left out the colon, didn't I? I'm so sorry.
All right. It is
You can report
strings,
colon,
a
guitar adjacent podcast. You can report me to HR. I understand. And this is a tack on to our holiday gift ideas episode. And so for this episode, I chose a 2-album collection.
Spicy.
I know, right?
It's almost cheating.
It's almost cheating. And those 2 albums, it's a compilation, which is a collection of songs done by various artists. And it is Merry Axmas and Merry Axmas Volume 2.
The Axmasing.
The Axmasing. The Axmasness. And as you know, I am an absolutely unashamed Steve Vai fan. You're aware of this.
Who is
I have been a fan of his. The first thing I ever heard from him, I did not know he was in Frank Zappa's band until later, but he put out a tune called The Attitude Song that was on a little flimsy plastic insert that you had to get along the perforation, pull out of a guitar magazine.
Yeah, you're saying this like everyone knows. First of all, you just said the word magazine.
I did. All right. And this was something you had to play on a record player, a turntable.
With a needle on it.
With a needle. And this was probably 16 or 17 years old. And of course, that song, The Attitude Song, was on his first solo release called Flexible, Flex-Able, mind you. And then, of course, we know him from, he released an album called Passion and Warfare. And these are all instrumental rock guitar songs.
After a stint in the David Lee Roth band.
Yeah, so Passion and Warfare was after he was in David Lee Roth. He was after he was in Alcatraz too. He went from Alcatraz to then, Zappa to Alcatraz to David Lee Roth, and then he was in Whitesnake. Right? After Coverdale fired everybody, he was in the follow-up to the groundbreaking and brilliant 1987 album.
Yeah.
And I believe the album he played on was called Slip of the Tongue.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Everything with Whitesnake is sexual innuendo.
Yes, because Coverdale's perfect.
Yeah, and that's fine. And all the music was written, all the songs were written, but Adrian Vandenberg broke his wrist or had a problem with his wrist and he couldn't play the guitar. So Vai came in, recorded all the songs, and then went on and did a tour. And while he was on that tour is when Passion and Warfare broke big. So they actually let him play instead of just an unaccompanied guitar solo, which a lot of guitar players will engage in that wankery in a show. They just let him, Coverdale went backstage to do whatever Coverdale does when he's off stage. And the band played a Steve Vai song from his Passion and Warfare album. It was absolutely brilliant.
That's amazing.
And I've gotten almost everything else that he's ever done. I found out about him because one of my students at the time brought me a song by a guy called Joe Satriani off his first album. And then I found out later that Joe Satriani was not just Kirk Hammett's guitar teacher. Although if Joe is responsible for Kirk's abuse of the wah, then we got to have words. But he was also Steve Vai's guitar teacher. And so I was like, well, I got to check this guy out. And, Satriani had Surfing with the Alien, was his second album. And it's just been a whole thing. So anyways, all of this is a pointless explaining. In 1996, Vai got the idea to do a compilation album of Christmas music by guitar players, which there was guitar Christmas music, but it was all mellow stuff, man. Before then, the Ventures had a Christmas album, but I wouldn't call that heavy metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was time for some metal guitar Christmas songs. So he came up with this idea, called it Merry Xmas.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, that was released in 1997, and Merry Xmas Volume 2 came out in 1998. So he just basically reached out to all of the big guitar players of the time
Mm-hmm.
in the States anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some English guys on there too. And they came up with this idea. So I don't know if they did them in 2 stages or if he just put the word out and they got enough songs for 2 albums and he just put half of them on one and half of them on the other. I don't know quite. If I ever interview him, I will ask him about that. And now
I might just ask him anyway.
Yeah, don't get me wrong here. You got to either really love heavy rock guitars or you got to really love holiday music a lot to dig these albums, because they are not traditional Christmas music at all. As a matter of fact, I think they kind of started the genre of rock guitar instrumental Christmas
I was
music.
about to say, when you pointed out when this happened, I thought, didn't TSO happen right around this time? And maybe they
right around this
inspired
time. Yeah. So Volume 1, which is not really called Volume 1, it's just called Merry Xmas, picks off with Kenny Wayne Shepherd, who was one of the hottest young guitar players at the time. He was the logical extension of Stevie Ray Vaughan, who had by that point unfortunately passed away. But Kenny Wayne Shepherd brought on Stevie Ray Vaughan's band, and they did Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and it's a banger, right? It's a great opening track, and it's just fast and fantastic. Then they drop down to The First Noel, spelled in the Old English way with a W, by Eric Johnson, who at that point was not a seriously hugely known guitar player. He
wasn't a household name yet.
Right, he wasn't a household name, exactly, among guitar players. And that song picks up. It's not all acoustic, but it starts really nice. Then the master, the one and only himself, Jeff Beck. Now, being Jeff Beck, he doesn't give us a Christmas song. He gives us Amazing Grace.
Okay.
Right.
I'll allow it.
All right, I'll allow it too, especially when you hear it, because instead of having a band behind him, he just got himself a gospel choir, and they a cappellaed the song underneath his melody line, and it is haunting and beautiful and inspiring and all of the superlatives you can possibly. It is the Jeff Beckest thing ever. You know, especially since there's no other guitar or even bass to distract from his amazing technique.
It just needs to be Jeff. He could have done it solo with nothing and it would have been just as haunting.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got Brian Setzer Orchestra, who also from time to time tours at Christmas time.
Yes, he does.
Doing an instrumental version of Jingle Bells in that big band, you know, swing blues, whatever you want to call it, style that he does. Joe Satriani himself comes in with a thing called the Silent Night, Holy Night Jam, which starts with the melody of Silent Night and then devolves into jam. I mean, I feel like he just went in the studio with his band and said, you know, 12 bar in B, watch me for the changes, try to keep up. Do you know what that quote is from?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does. Back to the Future. I just threw that at you.
My wife is going to be so disappointed that I didn't know that. That sucks.
And Steve Morse, who at the time I believe was pre-Kansas.
Yeah.
I think this was before he played in Kansas. If it was right around that same time.
It was post-Dregs. It was pre-Kansas. Yeah.
Okay. And he goes into full Morse mode with Joy to the World. He's got a little drum machine keeping the rhythm behind him, and it sounds fantastic. Now, if you had the LP, and I did not have the LP, that was the end of side 1. You flip it over, and it kicks in with Steve Vai making his contribution, a song called Christmas Time Is Here, which if you remember It's a Charlie Brown Christmas,
Yeah,
is from It's a Charlie Brown's Christmas.
that's a great. I'm so glad he did that.
Yeah, and he did it with piano, just like he was with the Vince Guaraldi trio, and it's amazing. Then you got Joe Perry with a rocked out version of Blue Christmas. And that arrangement is so good. I copped it with my band several years, 10 years later or so. And we did a vocal version of it. And we sang over the first half, and then it breaks out into a raucous jam. And we just threw that jam down, and it sounded really cool. It's a great, great arrangement. Alex Lifeson, who at that point had never recorded anything without his buds in Rush.
Yeah, and we're talking the 90s. That's right.
Yeah.
His first solo album didn't happen for a while after.
Yeah. So he does Little Drummer Boy, which I think is even more poignant now that Neil Peart has passed away.
Aww.
And then we get Richie Sambora in a rare departure from his duties with Bon Jovi.
You said duty.
I did say duty. He gives us Oh Holy Night and reminded everybody that he is more than just John Bon Jovi's guitar player, which I think he got pigeonholed in that role, and he is astoundingly creative. And both I and the album save the best for last. And the last song on the album, This Is Still Merry Xmas, is a guitarist I don't think anybody listening to this podcast has ever heard of.
I know I didn't till I played the album.
Yeah, and he's a Japanese guitarist called Hote with an H. It's like the word hotel, but you replace the L with an I. And of course, he's huge in Japan. Most Americans have never heard of him. He's a diehard Strat player. And this is my favorite factoid about Hote. He got expelled from high school because he refused to cut his hair. Expelled.
That's the most metal thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Super metal. And he takes on John Lennon's song, Happy Xmas, War is Over.
Oh, that's cool.
And it is such an emotionally charged rendition of the song. And it builds into, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's that good.
Yeah.
And it just builds and builds and builds, and then it crashes and ends with kind of a music box sound. And it's just, I've said amazing like 4 times, and it's the amazingest thing on the album. I think it's the best song on the album. And if you can find a live version of it on YouTube, that's worth listening to as well.
Okay.
Excuse me. Now, volume 2 comes out the next year. If you ask me, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's not quite as good. It kind of lacks the energy and uniqueness that the first volume has. The production is really good, and there's a huge number of top shelf guitar players. And I'll list them for you. Ready? Steve Lukather, right? The one and only studio whiz and Toto guy. Neil Schon from Journey, Steve Stevens, who was going through his flamenco phase at the time. That's Billy Idol's guitar player. Trevor Rabin, the guy that took over from Steve Howe for the second iteration of Yes. Zakk Wylde.
Who?
Zakk Wylde.
Don't know that guy.
He was playing with Ozzy at the time. John Sykes from
aforementioned Whitesnake,
and then Blue Murder. Robin Trower, Al Di Meola, and even the Nuge, Ted Theodore Nugent. And Ted Nugent does Deck the Halls, and it is exactly as wild as you think it's going to be. It is. It's wilder. So Zakk Wylde does the Zakk Wylde thing on an acoustic guitar. And Nuge's Deck the Hall is wilder than that.
Gotcha.
Stu Hamm is on the album as well. He's a bass player, but I don't really like that song, so I don't listen to it. I never even burned it to my computer. The best song on that album from my position is John Sykes does God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, and it's the Whitesnakest Christmas song ever. And it's worth getting that album just for that song. There you go. Right.
Yeah.
I think the best songs are on volume 1, but I listen to both albums on random, so it spreads them out. And I think it's worth getting both albums just to hear the best guitar players from the 80s and 90s. Now, there's not other than Richie Sambora and maybe Steve Stevens, it's not a lot of hair metal guitar players, which are my avowed favorites. But these are all monster guitar players.
Yeah, I would say not a bad one in the bunch.
Yeah, it's so worth it. And even my wife doesn't cringe anymore when I play this album, as long as the volume's not too loud, right? She likes the Eric Johnson First Noel. She likes that song a lot. She's not really super into heavy music, but she does love Christmas songs.
Right.
And I think the one oversight is are there Hanukkah songs? Because there's no Hanukkah songs on these albums.
Well, would you want to hear those anyway? They're all very depressing.
I don't know.
If you're going to listen to Christmas music, these and, from the previous episode, you just throw some TSO into the mix and with the traditionals, and I think it rounds out a really nice playlist. A little spice to your Christmas playlist.
Yeah, my Christmas playlist is these two albums, all the instrumental songs from the TSO releases. Los Straitjackets put out 2 albums of Christmas surf music.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, they did. The Ventures put out an album of Christmas music. And so that's my instrumental guitar Christmas music playlist. There's also, I'm going to mention, although I don't know if it's even available anymore. I don't think it is. I was unable to find it. There's a cat called Dan Cummins now there's 2 Dan Cumminses out there in the world. One of them is a comedian. This is not that guy.
Okay.
This Dan Cummins plays in a Journey cover band, a Journey tribute band, excuse me. Fantastic guitar player. He did an EP of, I think, 8 Christmas songs, instrumentals, and they are amazing. And here's the thing. His name is Dan, right? So he called his EP Feliz Navidad.
I will allow it because it's Christmas.
Yeah. And he's got some videos on YouTube, but I have not seen, I think whatever page he was selling the album, the CD on, has expired or disappeared or whatever. He does have a website. If you search Dan Cummins guitarist, you'll find his website, and he sells his solo material there. Phenomenal guitar player. He's a Gear Page guy. And every year when the Gear Page thread pops up, hey, what Christmas music should I listen to? I say you should all be listening to Dan Cummins' Feliz Navidad, because it's a great Christmas album.
Nice.
So
I dig it. All right. Well, if you're done with that,
I am done with that.
I owe everyone a callback to the previous episode. So we released an episode with the holiday gift guide, and some of the honorable mentions were these all-purpose polishing cloths that, at least for the 3rd or 4th time that I've mentioned one episode, I could not remember the name, and it's getting embarrassing. So in between episodes, I got them. They're looking backwards, but they are called Miracle
Cloth
all-purpose polishing cloth. They are made with real coconut oil, and they are honestly the greatest thing since Betty White.
Thank you, my friend, for adopting that into your lexicon.
Oh, don't even, you didn't have to convince me once you explained it. So what I use them for is polishing frets. They are easier and less time consuming than the micro mesh treatment. The micro mesh treatment is still my number one, but that's a long time consuming process and only necessary if your frets are really in dire need of like a serious like attack.
Keep talking. I'm going to grab something.
Go grab. But these will do in between those serious polishes. All you have to do is tape off the frets or use a fret guard that you can now get on Amazon for multiple scale guitars, and then just run this over. And it removes a ton of schmutz off of your frets. You will love it. You don't even have to add polish because they are
impregnated
like a high school teenager. All right. So what do you? Such a boomer thing to say. I know. Go ahead. What you got, bro?
There's a holiday thought for you. I wanted to mention a couple other holiday music albums. Brian Setzer Orchestra has put out two albums of Christmas music.
And just amazing.
And here's one I got just recently. Reverend Horton Heat, We Three Kings, holiday favorites. And it's got such bangers as Frosty the Snowman, Winter Wonderland, Santa Looked a Lot Like Daddy, and Santa Claus Is Coming to Town. It's a fun album. If you've never seen Reverend Horton Heat, he is neither a reverend nor is his name actually Horton. It's Jim Heath is the guitar player, but they're a fantastic band, and they're like acid rockabilly, if you want to call it that. I mean, they're like if you like the Stray Cats and you wish the Stray Cats had never moved on, you'll like Reverend Horton Heat.
Okay, I dig it.
Yeah,
all right.
It's good,
So
it's good stuff. And the album is a festive green vinyl LP.
You gotta love that. All right, so folks, I believe that wraps up our Music That Matters segment with the celebration of Christmas music combined with metal from the 80s and guitar playing wizardry. That is Merry Xmas 1 and Merry Xmas 2, the Merry Xmasing. This time it's personal. I want to thank Wes, the co-host, who has the basso profundo, and of course, I'm just his color guy. You know, I bring the laughs.
Yeah, and it's exciting for me reaching the end of 2023 and how much fun I've had with this podcast.
It's dope.
And I so very much look forward to more in 24.
Yeah, there's going to be more. And all you have to do is go to differentstringspodcast.com to visit the Different Strings Guitar Adjacent podcast home on the web for all sorts of shenanigans. Drop comments. Please like and subscribe and drop comments about your favorite Christmas music. Please engage with us. Send us emails, questions, suggestions, and all that good stuff.
Yes, all of what he said. And I have one more question before we go, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
What's your plan for the rest of the afternoon?
I believe there will be napping.
Napping. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. Before we go, we should probably say Merry Holidays to everyone. Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Thank you for doing 2023 with us. It's going to be an awesome 2024, guaranteed.
Are you ready to air some? We better air our grievances off air.
Okay, let's do that.
All right, I'm going to hit the record button and
peace.